It begins with a name whispered in betrayal, Larry Whittaker, a man who for years said almost nothing, who watched quietly from the shadows of the crumbling house in odd West Virginia as the world turned his family into a spectacle. But now he speaks, and when he does, it's not for the cameras. It's not to entertain. It's because something inside him snapped. He says they lied, not just to him, but to all of us. Eric Carroll, Patrick Rourke, two outsiders who came into the Whittakers' lives promising salvation, a house, dignity, safety. They called themselves guardians, said they were family, said they would fix what the world had broken. But what they left behind was worse than what they found. There's money missing, trust shattered, family members torn from one another. And in the middle of it all stands Larry, humiliated, furious, and determined to expose what he now calls one of the most disgusting betrayals his family has ever endured. This is not just a story about poverty. It's about power, about exploitation in the age of social media charity, and about one man's vow to set the record straight, no matter who it burns. The truth didn't come from the influencers. It came from the man they tried to erase. And now he's ready to talk. For decades, the Whittakers lived in near-total obscurity, hidden away in the Appalachian folds of odd West Virginia. Locals knew of them. Whispers of the inbred family passed through town like folklore, spoken in lowered voices, wrapped in discomfort and mystery. But outside those narrow dirt roads, they were invisible. That changed in 2020 when documentary filmmaker and photographer Mark Laita released a video that would explode across the internet. Titled Inbred Family, the Whittakers, it wasn't just a portrait of poverty. It was a jarring, intimate exposure, raw, unsettling, and instantly viral. The world watched in stunned fascination. Millions of clicks. Comments flooded in from every continent. People were horrified. Others were moved. Some couldn't look away. Later returned again and again, building a fragile trust with the family, especially matriarch Betty and brother Larry. He brought food, supplies. He listened. And eventually, he started something that seemed almost impossible: hope. In 2022, he launched the first GoFundMe. The goal: to fix their home, to give them running water, to treat them with the basic human dignity they'd been denied for generations. And it worked. Tens of thousands poured in. Viewers from all over the world gave generously, believing they were part of something good, something just. The repairs began. Walls were patched. A bathroom was added. The Whittakers were eating better, living cleaner, smiling more. For a brief moment, it felt like a happy ending was possible, that the camera for once had become a bridge instead of a weapon. But what no one saw coming was that this newfound visibility, this fame wrapped in charity, would soon turn poisonous. Because where there's money, there's always someone watching, and not all of them come with good intentions. What started with compassion quickly spiraled into chaos. The first fundraiser raised tens of thousands. The second, launched in late 2023, aimed even higher. $250,000 to finally buy the Whittakers a new home. A real one. With plumbing, a roof that didn't leak, heat for the winter. Mark Laita, still the family's closest ally, made a promise. We're going to get you out of here. But behind the scenes, the plan was unraveling. The money came in, but so did the calls. Every few weeks, a new emergency. The roof was caving. The fridge broke. Someone needed medication. Food was running low again. The fund, meant to grow into a house, was bleeding out dollar by dollar. And every time the phone rang, Mark answered. He paid the taxes. He delivered supplies himself. He wired cash over and over. Until finally, when YouTuber Tyler Oliveira arrived in early 2024 and filmed Betty saying, "What house?" Mark says, "We ain't got no more money," the internet erupted. The narrative flipped overnight. Mark Laita, once seen as a hero, was now being accused of betrayal. Where is the money people demanded? Where is the house? Accusations of fraud spread like wildfire. People questioned everything, the donations, the footage, even Mark's intentions. Had it all been a lie? Mark responded with receipts, bank statements, a video titled "The Problem with Social Media," where he showed proof that the money had indeed been spent on food, repairs, emergencies, even a funeral that turned out to be fake. And then came his confession. Never once have I ever gotten a thank you from anybody. By March 2024, broken and bitter, he shut it all down. The fundraiser, the filming, the hope. But the silence he left behind didn't last long. Into the vacuum stepped two new faces, men who said they could do what Mark couldn't. They came in with smiles, open hands, and promises louder than prayers. First came Patrick Rourke, a local from the same dusty corners of West Virginia, someone who knew the back roads and understood the whispers. Then came Eric Carroll from Georgia, a man with charisma, a camera, and a plan. Together, they introduced themselves not just as helpers, but as saviors. They set up Facebook pages, live stream visits, created YouTube content with titles like "Taking Care of the Whittakers." They branded themselves as the new voices of compassion, claiming to bring transparency, accountability, and action. Patrick was the boots on the ground. Eric was the voice online. They showed up with groceries, filmed themselves laughing with Timmy, drove Betty to appointments. They said they would build the family a house, right there on their property. They talked about floor plans, showed materials, asked for help. And the internet, still aching after the fallout with Mark, listened. The donations started again. This time, supporters were told everything would be different. Eric and Patrick were hands-on, they said. They weren't just filmmakers. They were family. In one now notorious video, they even called themselves two daddies and a Timmy, portraying the 46-year-old man with severe disabilities like a child, like a prop in a feel-good story written for clicks. At first, Betty and Larry went along with it, maybe out of hope, maybe out of exhaustion, or maybe because they'd already learned that pushing back meant losing help. But it wasn't long before things started to feel off. The house never materialized. The promises grew bigger, the footage more personal, the donations less visible. Questions started surfacing. Where was the money going? Who was actually in charge? And why did Eric and Patrick seem more interested in filming than in fixing? Beneath the surface of their kindness was something colder, something calculated. And soon, Larry Whittaker saw it for what it really was. He had watched it happen once before. Promises made, trust broken, and his family left worse than they started. But this time, Larry Whittaker wasn't going to stay silent. At first, he gave Eric and Patrick the benefit of the doubt. Like Betty, he hoped maybe these new guys would follow through where others had stumbled. But the longer they stayed, the more Larry began to see the cracks. It wasn't just the missing house or the endless live streams. It was the way they talked about his family, not as people, but as content. They filmed Timmy constantly, often in humiliating ways, called him their baby, posted videos showing the family in moments Larry believed should never have left the home. Personal fights, health issues, even bodily functions. All broadcast online for strangers to watch, comment, and judge. And the money? Larry says they never saw it. Donations poured in, but the food slowed. The repairs stopped. Promises of new appliances turned into empty boxes. Every time Larry asked where the funds were going, the answers got vaguer. Then came the biggest lie of all, that they were building a new house. Land was mentioned, materials teased. But month after month, the only thing that got built was a larger online following for Eric and Patrick. And then came the betrayal that cut the deepest, the attempt to take control. Larry discovered they'd been pushing to get power of attorney, trying to secure property deeds, acting like the Whittakers couldn't think for themselves, like they were too broken to be trusted, like they needed guardians, but not the kind that protect, the kind that own. He warned Betty, tried to pull the family back. But the damage was already spreading. Relatives began to turn on each other, caught between voices promising help and Larry's desperate pleas to wake up. For months, he fought from within, trying to hold the family together while the cameras kept rolling. And when the truth finally started leaking, when the fraud investigation was announced, when protective services stepped in and took Timmy, Lorraine, and Ray away for their safety, Larry had no more doubts. They weren't guardians, they were vultures. And Larry, the quiet brother no one ever expected to lead, became the one voice saying what needed to be said. Get out. You're not welcome here anymore. It all came crashing down in the fall of 2025. By then, whispers had become accusations, and accusations had become evidence. The West Virginia State Police released a formal statement. Eric Carroll and Patrick Rourke were under active criminal investigation for fraud. The charge? Soliciting donations on behalf of the Whittaker family, without their knowledge, without their consent, and without delivering what was promised. Supporters who thought they were helping buy a house for the Whittakers were suddenly being asked to come forward. Where did your money go? What was promised? What did you receive? But that wasn't the only blow. Adult Protective Services, following anonymous reports and mounting concern, intervened directly. In September, they removed 3 of the most vulnerable Whittakers, Timmy, Lorraine, and Ray, from their home. The residence was declared unsafe, filthy beyond reason. The very place Eric and Patrick had vowed to improve had become a hazard under their watch. No house, no help, just cameras, drama, and broken lives. And behind the scenes, the alliance between Eric and Patrick shattered. Live streams once full of cheer turned into mudslinging matches. Patrick accused Eric of abandoning the family when it got hard. Eric accused Patrick of masterminding the fraud. They blamed each other for the collapse, each trying to crawl out of the fire with their image intact. But Larry had seen enough. He banned them both. Not figuratively, literally. They were no longer allowed near the Whittaker property. No more videos, no more updates, no more manipulation. For Larry, the heartbreak wasn't just about lost money. It was about dignity, stripped away again and again in front of millions. It was about trust, abused by men who claimed to care. It was about his family, torn apart by outsiders who treated their suffering like a brand. What started as a story of hope had become a case file. And Larry wasn't just a witness anymore. He was the reason it stopped. The cameras have quieted. The live streams are gone. But the wreckage is still there, splintered across the lives of a family that never asked to be famous. Timmy, Lorraine, and Ray remain under state supervision, their future uncertain. Protective services now weigh decisions that used to rest within the family. The Whittaker home, once the symbol of rustic resilience, now stands as a case study in what happens when exposure turns into exploitation. Mark Laita has returned, cautiously. With a new fundraiser monitored by an independent conservator, he's trying again. But the magic is gone. The donations have slowed. The trust once stretched thin has finally torn. Even Laita admits it. This whole thing almost got me canceled. It's a headache. I wouldn't do it again. As for Eric and Patrick, their legacy is one of accusation and collapse. Both are now publicly disavowed, under investigation, their online reputations in ruins. What began with promises of redemption ends with suspicion, betrayal, and state subpoenas. And then there's Larry. He didn't ask for this spotlight. He didn't want to be the voice of outrage. But when no one else stood between his family and the people trying to use them, he stepped forward, not as a hero, not as a martyr, but as a man who refused to let the story end in silence. His message is simple. We were used. We were lied to. And now we're taking it back. The story of the Whittakers isn't over. But if there's one thing left to learn, it's this. Exposing a family doesn't mean helping them. Filming suffering doesn't heal it. And turning poverty into content has a cost far greater than clicks or cash. Because some things, dignity, trust, family, don't survive a second betrayal.